Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Surface, and I'm looking across at a man who doesn't just ask questions. He scans your soul like a TSA scan machine. That's right, friends, the former Navy SEAL, Garrett Unkelbach. A man who can say 5 words and have you confessing things you haven't even told your therapist.
Nick is uh Nick is confessing right now. He's speaking from experience. I've done this to him. So
I don't know that you've ever got me to confess anything because I don't really walk around harboring secrets, just for the record. But I just think about you have a good way with people, and I know you have.
questions open doors. Questions are keys.
Yes, and I'm glad that you brought that up, Garrett. See, I led perfectly into this because that's what we're covering today is 10 questions that God asks in scripture and what it reveals about him. And questions are a very interesting thing because we ask them all the time. We actually did a whole podcast on questions and deep cut for all the Easter egg fans of the podcast. If Garrett ever had his own podcast, he said he would call it Better
Yeah.
Questions. That was like your.
Before God sent Nick into my life and we formed the Impossible Life, I said, I could do a podcast on better questions because I think really that's the key to problem solving. It's the key to bringing value. It's the key to so many issues in your life. If your marriage isn't working right, there's a problem, but you're probably just asking the wrong question.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. Well, and so where do we see famous questions? Well, one of the most famous examples that jumped right into my head, G, was in 2022. Matt Walsh. If you don't know who Matt Walsh is, he's a conservative filmmaker and political commentator, and he made a movie called "What Is a Woman," which sounds very, very basic, right? G, like I can't believe you can make a movie on that because surely it's so simple. Except for he made it in 2022 when gender confusion and all sorts of stuff was going on, and he basically just walked around and asked all sorts of people, "What is a woman?" And like you would think that'd be a really simple question, and he got like blank looks, complication. He talked to gender experts and all sorts of people in positions of authority, shall we say? And it was a widely debated movie. I'll say that certain people said that it was transphobic and it was like, they labeled it as like hateful. Other
It
people
was a
thought
hot
it was
take.
just, yeah, it was a hot take movie, but it actually catapulted Matt Walsh to fame because at that point I don't think many people had heard about him. So just a simple question, G, what is a woman? And there you go.
It's a powerful question. It's like the question I ask men all the time. Why wouldn't your wife listen to everything that you say? Right?
Right.
That's the right when men are telling me they're struggling in their leadership with their marriage, that's cutting to a question that really answers the actual problem. I do also want to just pause in the middle of our show here because
Oh,
I'm about to, crack open
what
for
you got
those of you
there?
who can see on video. This is some ID Life Energy Pina Colada. I was going to just casually do this while we were, starting the show. I was like, well, wait a second. Why don't I just go ahead and plug our sponsor, ID
Yes.
Life. ID Life, thank you for this exceptional product that is going to help me make it through this show today.
Yeah, and thank you as well for the same things. I already have my pina colada energy like I do every single day. Literally every day, I take my BioAge, my which is my NAD plus. I take that under
I'll
my
take
my.
mine. I'll take my bio age after the ID Life. This is, my mom's the super health expert. This is Darlene plug. She said the choline in the energy, you want that before you take the NAD. So I'm gonna
Really?
drink. Yep, I don't know.
I was told it was the
Science
other way around.
above my pay grade. I don't know. You're supposed to take them together. Maybe I could be wrong. This is a Darlene
Oh,
question. I'm
yeah.
gonna drink my
Well,
energy, then I'm gonna take my NAD
so
strips.
I do the same thing every single day, and dude, I feel great. So, anyways, I already took mine, and it feels wonderful. And yeah, shout out to ID Life, and shout out to I know we've had actually a good number of people who have actually gone and bought that and sleep, and I don't know what else
A lot.
they've got, but
Speaking of BioAge, a lot of we talk about energy all the time because we love that product. Tastes great. You need to add the BioAge with it. It's the next level.
yeah, that's what is. Gee, we're talking about. So, what's BioAge?
Um, BioAge it's NAD precursors. Like this is I do not know the science on BioAge as well. I was not around the ID Life team when this product was created, so I was not in the science back rooms like I was for energy. That's what I know. The BioAge is NAD precursors. Helps you. Well, I'll tell you what it does for me more than I can
That's
tell
what I
you
was
the
gonna say.
science
Yeah.
on this product. Um, Better focus. I'd say better energy. Also, for some people, they may not want me to say this, but that's okay. This is not a sponsor plug. This is in our episode. For some people, it improves their vision. If you have like vision issues or eyesight
Yeah.
problems, That's been a common one for people. But for me, I can feel it from like a memory sharpness, especially doing things like podcasts. Like I've kind of optimized a lot of my life for mental performance. Just like I was speaking, last week, that's why I use things like Whoop. I can tell the difference between maybe the audience can't, but I can when I'm at like 80% versus when I'm at 100%. And I want to always be at my sharpest. And I feel like NAD helps me do that.
It 100% does. It helps you because like you stop producing it whenever you start getting into, I believe, your 30s is whenever your body stops producing NAD, and that helps your cellular regeneration. So I like the thing that I noticed when I started taking NAD plus with the ID Life BioAge strips is my HRV on my Whoop went up, which was like a
Yeah.
real, my HRV is naturally very low,
For
and
the
so
you're getting all the Whoop hackers out there, they're going to be buying
dude,
this
I love
product.
Whoop. Like we're not sponsored by Whoop, but I would tell anybody to get a
I'd
Whoop.
like
It's
to be.
amazing. And yeah, I would like to be maybe one day.
Okay,
Anyways, but
let's keep going.
the point being, yes, we do what we say. We plug stuff that actually works that we use, whether they pay us or not. So there you go. All right, so G, let's get back to this. So we talked about the what is a woman, which is a great question. Here's another question based off what we just said. What are you putting into your body? But the questions that we've had on this podcast that I thought were so apt was when we had Dr. Robbie on and we talked about raising kids. He said the three questions that everyone is answering all the time is who am I, what am I worth, and what's my purpose? And I just thought that was so concisely said. And he said those were the foundations of mental well-being. And it's identity, purpose, and value. We talk about those things all the time. It's nice when a psychiatrist who's helped millions of people across the world comes on and goes, "Hey, everything you guys said is actually backed up by psychology." It's like, great. The wisdom of God is been shown to us and just backed up by science, as it always is. So as we said, the purpose of questions and the reason we're going into this, questions bring focus. Here's a great example, and I do this every day. I have three kids, and they'll go to school. And you ask your kid when they come home from school, "Hey, how was your day? How was school today?" "Good." "What'd you do?" "I don't know." And I remember like the first like few days, whenever I got this, I'm like, man, I actually want to know what's going on with my kids. So I reframed the question to, "Hey, what's the best thing about your day at school today?" And guess what? Suddenly they're giving me very specific details about classes they're in and projects that they've not talked about ever before because they're a kid and they only care about what they're doing in the moment. So like I switched the question. Now I get a better answer because then I can be like, "Oh, what's the project?" And I get to find out from my kids what's going on. And that's a
With
very simple example.
I feel like with kids, the right way to ask them questions is like through what their frame is.
Oh
And
yeah.
like with Grace, I'm like, hey, what did you do, today? She's like, I don't know. But then if I say like, what did you do that made Dolly laugh? That's what she calls Lindsay's mom. Like, what did you do that
Oh,
made
okay.
Dolly laugh? Because she likes to be funny, like her
Yeah.
mom. So like Grace will start telling me all the things she did that's funny.
I love that the Lord bless you with not just one funny woman in your life, but a second little one that's coming up. And I would dare I say Trinity is also running down that vein. He gave you,
It's the,
God is telling you something, G.
for sure.
All right. So, and I got to give credit to my man, Tony Robbins, who said, "You want better answers, ask better questions." So we're going to get into
Well,
these 10
and
questions.
and it's even the asking the right question will get you looking at the right things.
Right.
I'm around a bunch of smart people all the time, and some of the guys that
Thank
I
you.
work with, I
I,
wasn't talking about you,
what?
but some of the guys that I work with, one of them specifically used to be a direct report to Elon Musk for years at the Fremont factory, and he's talked a lot about some of the things that he learned from Elon. And it's commonly known that Elon has like his own process for engineering. And I won't go into all of it, but step one on his engineering process is question every requirement because the way that he sees it is many engineers solve the wrong problems. They over
Yeah.
optimize something that doesn't need to exist. And so it's question, like he starts with question everything, right? Like all the parts, all the pieces on this, you say it has to be this tall, blah, blah, blah. He's like, question all of that because I think you guys have solved some of the wrong problems. And so he starts with the questioning and making sure that they're asking the right question.
You know who else did that is a little guy named Steve Jobs. That was because like Pastor Josh
Yeah.
Kraft he put out that thing the other day about how Steve Jobs his how to design insanely great products. The second thing on there was question everything about the current design, and it's like it's so simple, but it's not right because it's like we take so many things for granted, and underneath things you take for granted are what we call presuppositions, which means you've presupposed something like, oh well, this must be true. Well, if what you presuppose isn't true, all your conclusions that follow after it are also false. And this is what we call life. We all walk around with presuppositions that aren't based on facts.
It's
And
yep. It's Sherlock Holmes. Step one is put every possible conclusion on the table. Don't that's the presuppositions. Don't eliminate any of the potential conclusions. Start with
yeah,
everything on the table.
and philosophers have always asked great questions. I think about one of the great philosophers, Dwight Schrute, who says before he does anything, he asks, "Would an idiot do that?" And
It's a
if the
great.
answer is yes, I do not do that thing.
I do
So
not
there's
do
some
that thing.
there's some advice for life. All right, so we're going to ask much more important questions than what Dwight Schrute asked, but that just came to me. So we're going to look at these questions, G, and I love that you kind of mind these. So I got to give you credit where credit's due. But one of the things I want to remind when we're looking at these questions and when we're reading the Bible, always come with the heart of not that you want to discover something more about yourself or you want to just get a nugget for the day or whatever problem you're facing, but that you should come and actively seek to discover more who of God is. I always talk about if you want to read the Bible, if you want to understand it more and you're struggling, get Tara Lee Cobble's Bible Recap. It's super simple. It's free. It's on the YouVersion app on your phone. Once again, it's called the Bible Recap. It's free. So nobody's getting paid anything for it. It's just to be a blessing. And she does this thing every day. What you do is you read the Bible and then she does an overview video that if you watch it on 1.5 speed like I do, it takes 4 to 5 minutes. And she always she runs you through what happened, explains things that you might be confused on, reminds you of who's who and all that sort of stuff. And at the end, she says, "What's your God shot?" And the whole point of that is like your God shot is what did you see revealed about God? And I love that because that's the heart of how we have to approach at the
Mm.
very core of all of our faith is just a God that said, "Hey, I'm going to make you and I want to be with you and I want us to know each other." And if we lose that heart, we make things so much more complicated. So I want to remind everybody that's why we're diving into these questions.
Yes, that's the whole point of his word is he's
Mm-hmm.
revealing himself to us. Let me show you who I am.
Yeah, so good. All right, G. So hit us, man. Why does God ask us questions then?
So where this started for me, we're going to go through the questions chronologically in the Old Testament. Jesus asked questions in the New Testament, and that's very different. There's great lessons to be learned there, but all of these questions we're going to look at today, right? There's 10 questions God asks in the Old Testament. We're going to start it chronologically in Genesis. Sorry, not chronologically, but biblical book order. Chronologically
Ooh,
would
yeah,
change actually some of the order on these questions, but we're going to
I
go through
appreciate that.
the order of the books. And where this started is there's a question that if you've been with us in Mindset Mastery, which if you're not in there and you've been listening to this podcast for over a year and you haven't joined us in Mindset Mastery, honestly, I'm not sure what's holding you back. In Mindset Mastery is really where we jump in and go deep on a lot of the mindsets that we teach here and make this like it's great to listen here. You can learn so many valuable tools, but if you want to sharpen those tools and make sure that you're applying all of them correctly, you need to spend a year with us in Mindset Mastery. And one of the topics that we cover in Mindset Mastery, purpose, we go really we I use this scripture a lot and I've studied it a bunch because it is the question I have asked so many times in my life, and it's the question I know about every single human that has walked the earth is why am I here? What's the purpose of my life? And the Bible tell actually like we all have that question, and that's Ecclesiastes 3:11. God placed eternity in the human heart. There's a searching and a longing within every person for what like we know that we're more than just flesh. So what else is there and why? And so out of that, we seek to answer this question, what's my purpose? And the Bible talks about what our purpose is, Ephesians 3:20, right? God created you for good workmanship. There's many scriptures on purpose, but nowhere in scripture does it say, here's what Garrett's purpose is, right? You can read the whole thing. You're not going to find your name in there where it says, here's what your purpose is. However, God does want us to know what our purpose is, and he wants us to discover it, right? And there is a path for that. We should go into all of that path in Mindset Mastery. But one of the things that leads you to your purpose is what's in your hand. And this is the scripture, Exodus 4:2, where Moses gets what most people would want. What most people want is
Right.
like, God, can you just tell me? Just tell me what my purpose is,
Yeah, just
right?
show up.
Send me an email or a certificate or whatever that just says, here's what you're supposed to do. 99.99999% of the people that walk this earth will never get that from God. God gives this to Moses, and Moses is like, "Hey, I think you got the wrong guy. You want me to be the leader of Israel and lead them out of Egypt, but I murdered a guy. I have a speech impediment. Like why I don't know why anybody would listen to me. The Pharaoh's not going to listen to me. You're choosing the wrong person. So God comes to Moses, tells him exactly what his purpose is, and Moses is unsure. And what had this is the end of Exodus 3. Exodus chapter 4 verse 2. God asks Moses a question. So instead of God just slapping Moses upside the head and saying, "Hey, dummy," right? Like, I don't know if you forgot, but I'm God. I obviously know what your purpose is. He doesn't do that. He asks him a question that repoints him in the right direction, because this is a question that's part of the picture. It's not the whole picture.
Yeah,
Listen
so
to what we
good.
do in Mindset Mastery is a question that's part of the picture that points you to your purpose. So when Moses doesn't catch it, the way that God repoints Moses is he asks him this question: Moses, what's in your hand? Right? Because Moses is saying that he's not good enough. And what God says, he says, what's in your hand? And with that question, what he's saying is, yeah, I don't need you to tell me what you don't have. I need you to be faithful with what I've given you, right? We'll come back to this question in a minute, but I'm starting us here because this is the question that I first like dug into, and I was like, man,
Mm,
God, if God's asking a question, he's not asking for information. Most of
right.
the time we ask questions in that way. Like, I ask a question because I want to know the answer to it. When God's asking us a question, there's no answers that he doesn't know. So if God is asking us a question, it's a very different type of question, and that's a question that's going to repoint us to get us. God's trying to help us think about the right things. So so the reason I wanted to study this is like, man, the Exodus 4:2. God was speaking to Moses. This is a question for me as well, right? This is
Right.
what's going to point me to my purpose. Is I got to look at what's in my hand and be faithful with that. And so I say this to say it's kind of like an intro. We're going to look at all of these questions. All of these questions have context for our life. Now, of course,
Yes.
God was speaking to certain people for a certain reason. We'll cover some of the context, but the reason I think it is particular is if God's asking a question, there's a lesson to be learned. At
Hmm.
the very least, like Nick talked about, it reveals some of the character of God. But all of these questions reflect moments that we'll find ourselves in life. Exodus 4:2, one that pertains to all of us. All of these questions are lessons to be learned, questions that we need to answer. So, with that being said, here's 10 questions from the Old Testament, 10 questions that God asks. So, starting in the beginning, Genesis chapter 3, verse 9, God says this to Adam and Eve: Where are you? Okay.
Mm,
God's not asking Adam and Eve where they are because he doesn't know where they are.
right.
Really, the question is, why are you hiding from me? And this
Mm,
is if you know the story, they have sinned and they feel naked, they've covered themselves. So God's saying, Adam and Eve, where are you? And this is a question that all of us have to. This is kind of like I could flash these to some New Testament questions, but this is kind of like the question when in the New Testament, the last time Jesus is in the temple, that the Pharisees say, are you the Messiah? And he says, I'll answer your question if you answer mine. And that's when he says, is John the Baptist a prophet? And the reason, I won't go long into all of this, the reason that Jesus asked that question is because he's tricking the Pharisees. John the Baptist has declared that Jesus is the Messiah. And so if they
hmm.
say that John the Baptist is the prophet, they have to believe what he said. If they say he's not a prophet, then they'll be rejected by all of the people. And so in all of this, the way that Jesus dealt with it, the way that the Pharisees responded to Jesus' question was they said, we don't know. They didn't want to answer the question. And this is when something makes you uncomfortable, you're afraid to
Mm,
confront it. And Genesis 3:9 is this is something that we all face, not necessarily God, speaking to you and saying, where are you? But all of us have this understanding of like, there's right and wrong, there is sin. And many people who live with sin, they want to hide from God because
yeah.
it's the same way that like you don't want to just like be naked in public. It kind of makes you feel uncomfortable to do that. In the same way that Adam and Eve said, like, man, we're something's wrong with us, and I'm scared to stand before God. And this is where we have to have a heart change, and one, be
Yeah.
willing to turn from our sin, but more importantly, be willing to turn towards God.
Yeah, that's so good, G. You made me think about, you talk about seeing some of the character of God and talking about how Jesus obviously perfectly revealed the Father. I love whenever he challenges the commonly held belief in the Hebrew faith and says, if the Messiah is David's son, then why does he call him the Lord? And he references that psalm where he says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. And he just leaves it there. He doesn't keep going. It's just like he allows the question to start the work, which is such a good thing of God. And for this question, I mean, are we hiding from God? Like, where are you? Are you hiding from God, or are you walking with him? I think where this comes into play so often, look, man, we're all going to fall short of the glory of God. And it's that question of when something goes wrong, when something's troubling you, when something's causing you whatever it is, anxiety, or if you've actually sinned and like willfully sinned, what's your first thought process? Is it like, man, I got to cover this up, like, oh, God's so distant from me? Or is it a thought process of, man, I'm going to take it to my dad? Because when you know who your father is, you know that it's the best thing you could do is to take it to him, because he's going to have the best solution, not to try and hide or figure it out on your own, whether it's a problem or whether it's sin. And so that is a very apt one for us to all answer, I think, on a regular basis.
So, yeah, very, very good. Next question. We won't go as long on this one. Genesis chapter 3, verse 13. God says to Eve, "What is this you have done?" Okay, God knows what she's done. He's not
Right.
saying, like, tell me what happened. What this question is about is consequences. It's
Yeah.
understanding that we all have to take responsibility for our actions. God's sovereign, man's responsible.
Yeah.
Adam and Eve are responsible for what happened there. And so this is a remind, like this question is again, like you started us with, Nick. It reveals some of the nature and character of God. That God's saying, look, what did you do? I told you not to. You did it. Now what's good? Because after this, God tells them what the consequences are.
Yeah, and if you want to know what the responsibility for our actions, if you want to make your life harder, just sin. Because look at their primary responsibility. He gave Adam work to do, and what got harder after the sin? The work. The ground's going to grow up thistles and thorns, and by the sweat of your brow, you're gonna provide for yourself. He said, "Be fruitful, multiply." So he gave man a helper. And what was Eve's work that got more complicated? In great pain, you're going to now give childbearing. And so it's like that's the responsibility for our actions, to understand like sin has consequences that are far more than what we realize, and it literally makes everything harder. Yes, I mean that's an amazing one to just say, "What have you done?" Oh, by the way, here's the punishment. So,
Right.
so good.
So next one, and I will say for all of these questions, right, we're going to cover these quickly. It is in my heart at some point to write an entire Bible study on these 10 questions, because that like you need to study all of the context. So we're
Yeah,
giving the reference. I would encourage you to go, especially on some of these next ones that we're going to get into. You kind of need the whole story. We'll cover some of it quickly, but you do need more context. And these are things, uh, just like what most of my messages were when God first gave me the opportunity to preach. The end of my message was, "Hey, go read it for yourself," right? Because what
yeah,
you need with this is not, Garrett and Nick digest the Bible for you so you don't have
right.
to. This is us to set you up and point you in the right direction so you can go see for yourself. Right.
And
So
whatever we do to
Genesis,
that point, I'll put all these questions with the references in the show notes, so make it easy
yeah,
on you.
great.
Go ahead,
So
G. Sorry.
question number 3, Genesis chapter 16, verses 6 through 10. God says, "Where have you come from, and where are you going?"
Hmm.
And this is to Hagar when she's running from her situation, running from Abraham in the desert. God had a plan for Hagar. Um, Abraham and Hagar's relationship was probably not exactly what God wanted in the beginning for Abraham. However, God still had a plan for Hagar, and God uses Hagar and God uses Ishmael in the ways that He does. Now they're not God's chosen people, but God still does something with their lives, and you see them all throughout the Old Testament. And she's running away, and so this is a question for any of us when we're in a struggle, when we're running from difficulty, and there's another question like this similar, and so there's kind of a comparative context between this question and the other one. But when we're in a difficult situation, that we don't just run from it. This is spiritual and this is physical. God has a great plan for our life, and so when things don't go exactly the way that you want them to go, you don't just run from that situation.
Hmm. I think it's so interesting when you think about you know that sounds like a very not meaningful question. It's very factual. Where have you come from and where are you going? I came from my bedroom and I'm going to my office. You know what I mean? Like very simple. That's how we would see this, but it was so much more revealing than that, right? Like you said, it's both literal and uh, the actual like external.
Well, I think what stands out to me, and not I don't want to go super long on this one, but what stands out to me is that it is like that God took time to ask a question to Hagar, who's not his chosen people,
Right.
right? Um, her Hagar's son Ishmael was like this is like Isaac was God's chosen son for Abraham. Ishmael is Abraham's son with Hagar, who
Hmm.
was Sarah's servant, right?
Yeah.
Abraham, it was out of a lack of faith and not trusting in God that this relationship happens and that Ishmael exists. yet God still speaks to her.
Yeah.
And like we can sometimes feel like, man, I'm just rejected by like I'm not the one that God's using. I'm not the one that God wants to work with. Like you can
Yes.
feel like this, like, you know, you can feel like a Hagar, so to speak. But God says, why are you running? Like
Right.
where did you come from? And basically, hey, go back and deal with this situation. Like I
Yeah.
still have a
Very
plan
good.
for you.
Very good. What's next, G?
Genesis chapter 32. Um, verse like the it's verse 24 through 29 is kind of this piece of the passage, but you really need to read all of Jacob's story. This is when Jacob wrestles with Esau. I mean, with Jake, when Jacob wrestles with the with God, wrestles with the angel of the Lord before he's on his way to go back and face Esau. And while he's wrestling with God, God asks him this question. He says, "What is your name?" And again, does God not know Jacob's name? Of course he does. God's asking him his name because Jacob is wrestling with the meaning of his name. This is also where God, you know, in Jacob's story, God renames Jacob to
Hmm.
Israel. Israel meaning wrestled with God and have overcome. And really, the whole point of this question is we are who God says. Right,
Yes.
because Jacob was leaning on his own identity, and God changed his name. You know, for many of us, God doesn't change our name, but God does change all of our identities, and that's what God does in Jacob's life, and he gets a name change along with it. And so Jacob was leaning on his, you know, the name Jacob means supplanter or deceiver or heel grabber, quite literally, because he was grabbing onto Esau's heel as he came out of the womb, and so that's what his name means, deceiver or supplanter. And that's where, and in this, God changes his name to basically say, "You're more than that. You are who I say you are. I have a plan for your life."
Yeah, and I mean, once again, when we're talking about the nature of God, what I would encourage everybody from this is to Garrett's point, like God may not have literally changed your name, but when he met Abram, he changed it to Abraham. He changed Simon to Peter. He changed Jacob to Israel. And it's a picture of God's transformative, redemptive work that he literally changes. Because, like, names, some people just name their kids stuff that they think sounds cool. But
Don't do that.
God, like, no, don't do that. That's a little side note. But names in Hebrew have a lot of significance and because of the meaning of the names, and it's very much almost like a prophetic statement towards the person's life. And so it's not an accident that like Yeshua for Jesus is the same as what Joshua was in the Old Testament. Like God's working in symmetry. He's like giving us clues into like people's lives, obviously being ones that deliver. And so I just encourage you, like, understand God's not here to just take your identity and make it a little better or to just clean up your past. It's to give you an entirely new identity. And to the point Garrett made, we are who God says we are. I think it even says in the Revelation that he has names written on rocks that he gives to them, which are names he's given to him, aka God's completely transformed you and sees you the way he made you. So just know you're not what you've done. You're not what other people have said about you. You're not even what you say about you. You are who God says you are.
And this was what's just one more piece of context is that this is like the lowest moment of Jacob's life.
Yeah.
He's it's a kind of a cowardly moment. He's on the run. He's afraid. I forget the biblical name for it, but the river that he's camped next to, the meaning of that river, like the word means despair, right? So like the
Right.
lowest moment of his life, camped next to the river called despair. And in this, he wrestles with God, and this is where God changes his name.
Right. Yeah. So good, man. All right, G,
So
what's next?
moving on, this is now we're at my favorite question in the Old Testament, Exodus 4:2. God says, "What's in your hand?" And this is the question that every single one of us has to ask. Many of
Hmm.
us, you know, wish for more, wish we were something that we're not, wish we had something that we don't have. And that's what God said to Moses is what's in your hand. And what was in Moses's hand, it's not that God doesn't actually know, right? Right. Again, it's not, God's not asking a little question. It's a reminder. What was in Moses's hand was a shepherd's staff. And God says, throw the staff on the ground, it turns into a snake. Pick up the snake, it turns back into a staff. And what God's saying to Moses, and I'm paraphrasing this chapter of the Bible, what God's saying to Moses is, I don't need you to tell me what you don't have. I need you to be faithful with what I've given you, right? That staff, a staff is used for protecting and leading animals, right?
Yeah.
For shepherding them. And God says, I'm going to use you to do the same. And by the way, I'm God, so I can do whatever I want to do with your staff. You just need to know that I've made you who you are, and I've given you the staff that you have, and I'm the one who's made this mission and calling you to do it. I will be with you. Just trust me and follow me. right? And use what's in your hand. Don't, many people come to this place and like, well, I could just be a leader if God would do
Hmm.
this. Well, I could just lead a Bible study if, men would just appear out of nowhere and start coming to my house. I could just whatever. People, tell me what they could do if they had certain resources. And God says, be faithful with what I've given you.
Yeah. And I think where you'll see this a lot, and I'm just going to share a quick story from my own life that's very relevant to the podcast, is you'll look at somebody else and you'll think, well, man, if I had his dad, then I could do that. Or if I had
Sure.
their money, then I could have done this. Or if I had their whatever, insert whatever. And early on in the podcast, obviously, for those of you who are new to the podcast, we know we're getting a lot of new listeners. This started because Garrett coached me. And one day I was running, I really felt what was a word from God, just say, like, Garrett needs to have a podcast. So I texted him fully with the heart to just serve him. I never even planned on being on the podcast. I was just going to produce it. And here we are 4 years later. Well, so we launched this podcast. And if you listen to the early episodes, and I know a lot of people go back because I see the stats, shout out to episode 4 when I get in the ice bath live on air. Not my proudest moment. Anyways, but if you listen
I
to the
need to go
first sort of,
listen to that again.
you don't. I don't really want you to do that. It's just fuel for your dark soul. Anyways, but the first 10 to 20 episodes, I would say, is very much me still in coaching mode. Like you'll hear on the podcast how a lot of our coaching sessions went, where Garrett would say something and I would like question him and we would just go back and forth. And I was very much almost, I didn't plan for it, but it's almost like I was getting free coaching. Well, so I start listening to these things and it wasn't free. It was very painful. But I start listening to these episodes and I'm like, dude, I sound like an idiot. I'm like the jester who's just like cracking jokes and Garrett's dropping like absolute wisdom bombs. And so I was like, I'm going to start preparing better for these. I'm going to come on. Like I was going to bring one liners and just like deep stuff. And I remember I felt such a like knot in my chest, my spirit of just like God being like, no, I've already made a Garrett Unkelbach. I've got one role and it's already filled. Like I need you to be the best Nick Surface. I've made you to be a very unique expression. You need to be the best you. And it was this real kind of like aha moment for me of what's in my hand because I had to stop and go like, okay, what am I actually like really good at? What's unique at me? What are the skills that I have that I need to sharpen better? So for me, it's like I've always been very good at speaking and it comes easily to me. But like I don't want to be the guy that's going and stuttering a lot. So I need to start listening and sharpening up. I need to start speaking slower. I need to start thinking a lot more before I spoke. Like that was how I could take what was in my hand and be better. And there were so many other examples. But I'm saying that to encourage people out there. What's in your hand is your gifts, your abilities, your unique experiences, the story of your life, your reputation, on top of all the stuff that you would think of, like your money and your kids and the people and whatever else you may think of. But like you have things that God has given you that it is your responsibility to take that and develop it. And that's what's in your hand. So like really think about that question because honestly, it's half of purpose and it is a big, big, big question. So sorry, Jay, I know we went a little bit longer on that.
No, it's great.
What's next?
Next question. First Kings chapter 19, verse 1 through 10. And I would say go read all of these stories, but this is such a good story to go read, and you'll need to back up a couple chapters, read all the
Mm,
way through Elijah's story.
yes.
First Kings chapter 19, verse 1 through 10. This is right after Elijah has like one of the most epic, powerful moments in the Bible, and Elijah is one of the figures that God bring, that we
Hmm.
see again in the New Testament. I could go on and on. Elijah's a very special figure. Okay.
Yes.
Um, and one of the most epic moments in the Bible, Elijah calls down fire from heaven and obviously that's God, but Elijah's the prophet who does it. And then right after that, kills over 600 men, all of the prophets of Baal. Like, that's just like a line in scripture. Like, one man kills 600 guys. Okay.
Yeah.
Ki-
He
Kind of,
slaughtered them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then after this, it says that Elijah was afraid, running from a woman hiding in the desert. Like, how do you go from like pinnacle moment to Tom Brady wins his seventh or whatever Super Bowl, and then the next week he's like, I shouldn't even play football. Like I'm no good. Like that's literally it's like, how do you go from this to this? Okay. And God asks him this question. He says, Elijah's hiding in the desert, and he said, like Elijah says, God, just kill me, right? Like no one, like don't, I'm just done. Like no one's
AKA
even
I quit.
following you. Yeah,
Yeah.
no one's even following you. Like what I do doesn't even matter. He's just feeling real
Hmm.
sorry for himself. And God says, Elijah, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And obviously, again, God knows how Elijah got there. But what God's saying to Elijah, like this is actually like a great zoom out question. Um,
Yes.
because I love what happens after this. The angel of the Lord says, like, hey, here's some food, right? You need to
Yeah.
eat. Like Elijah's
Right.
actually just hangry in this moment. and had he's probably honestly tired, hungry, and been through like some of the most exhausting things in his life. And maybe we need to like do a little reset and refresh, and maybe don't just like quit on your entire destiny because you're tired and hungry.
Yeah, there was no whoops back there for Elijah, but if there was,
He
he'd
was
have realized he was at 1%.
Yeah, he was hitting the 1% that day. And there's a lot more to this question, but God's saying, "What are you doing here?" And really this is like
Mm,
I'm making light of it a little bit, and I shouldn't, of just the tired and the hungry, but really God's saying like, "How did you come to this
yeah,
place?"
yeah.
And that's like when we go through we will go through the desert moments like Elijah has there, and you need to zoom out and say, "How did I get here?"
Yes. That is an awareness question, man. And I
Mhm.
feel we've done podcasts on awareness, so go look those up because otherwise we could spend another 40 minutes on this one. What's next, G? We got what, four more?
Job 38, chapter 1, verse 4. This is powerful question. Um, Job is lamenting a little bit to God, and this is God's longest monologue in the entire Bible. God said, in the midst, this is in the midst of it, because Job has complained a little bit to God, and God says to Moses, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation?" Basically, what he's saying to Job is, "You don't know nothing." Right? Like
Right.
I'm God, I'm sovereign, I have a plan, and don't question me.
Yeah.
That's and I love if you go read this story, I think this is like most people don't see it. I think this is hilarious. God's like halfway through his monologue, and Job's like, "You're right, I'm sorry," and God literally says, "No, I'm not done," and
Yeah.
he goes.
Yeah. Don't interrupt me. I've got a few more questions for you to answer. Yeah, he has some big flex questions in that monologue. It's incredible.
That question really is it's a foundational and leveling statement, and it's a humbling reminder for us if this is a fear of God question, like you don't know anything, right? Like you need to just trust God and understand that He's the God of the universe that
Yeah.
created it all, and He's the one that has the plan. And so you have no reason to question God.
Yeah, and man, if you are going through difficult things, and look, we're all going to go through difficult things. This is probably not a question that's comforting to you, but if you allow it to be, it will be because it's a humbling of like, hey, God's still writing your story. Because most people would say, man, I mean, actually, Job's friends were telling him, hey, you've sinned against God. If you lost all your property, all your kids, and your wife, and then you got like a skin disease, people would be like, you made God mad, and you'd probably be like, yeah, you're right. And so then this is Job gives a little bit of like, hey, what have I done wrong? Which seems like a reasonable thing. Like I haven't sinned, I haven't done this, and God steps in and says, "Hang on here, son." And so, like whatever you're going through, I guarantee you, it wasn't as bad as what Job went through. And if you'll have the wherewithal to ask that question, where was I when God laid the foundations? Like He's still in charge of your story. Trust His nature.
And the New Testament reference to this is Romans chapter 9, verse 20. Paul says, "Who are you to question God?"
Yeah, 100%. Talking about being the clay on the wheel and saying like, does He look at the potter and say, "Why'd you make me this way?" No,
Yeah.
no. All right, G. We are on question number 8. Let's get it.
Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1 through 8. This is many people know this scripture.
Mm,
And this is where God says to Isaiah, "Whom shall I send?" Right? God is saying, "I need someone who's going to go. Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" God, and this is the New Testament. Many are called, few are chosen.
yeah.
The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And the lesson in this, like God's not saying like who's the actual person. God knows who He's going to use. But this question is a call out. It's a cry from our
Yeah.
Creator saying, "Who wants to work for me?" Right? I
Yeah.
have I have great plans and great purposes for some of you. Unfortunately, some of you won't follow me. Unfortunately, some of you want to do your own thing. But for those who are willing, I have a great plan for you. Who will go for
Yeah.
us? It is an enlistment call.
Man, I pray that we all answer that. You'd put in our notes that availability it trumps ability every single time, and this just highlights that again, man. I love that so much. So good. All right, G.
Um,
Question.
Ezekiel 37. Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 1 through 4. Um, God says to Ezekiel, "Son of man, can these bones live?"
Mm,
And God's not, again, understand the question. God's not asking like, "Hey, can this, is this possible?" That's not what God's saying. He's saying, "Do you believe?" Right? God, this is a revealing of God's character, right? The way that you answer this question, like God's really asking, like, do you believe I'm the God of the impossible?
yeah.
God can. right? He's not Santa Claus. He doesn't need us to believe in him for him to be able to have power. That's not the way that it works. But this is a question, right? When God's saying, "Son of man, do these bones live?" He's saying, "Do you really believe that I'm the God of the impossible, or you just think I'm your buddy that's going to show up for you once in a while?"
Hmm. Yeah, and that is a core question, man, to just hit home because faith is the gift of God. And so it's not something to be strained out that we can, like you said, he's not genie God that if you have enough faith, he'll do whatever you want. But it's that absolute trust when you know that God's guiding you, that you're part of his story, and that he's using you to fulfill his plans and purpose on the earth, that it's a different sort of certainty and confidence because it comes from the mouth of the Lord. And that, man, like I just feel stirred as we're saying this, even though we planned the podcast, just to be reminded, like it's called the impossible life because Luke 137, with God, nothing is impossible. So, man, just if there's any takeaway from this episode, I hope it's that you press more into God, that you have a deeper longing to know him, and that you just, you truly give of your heart to be closer to him, because that is like the essence of all that we do. Which we have one more question, G.
Last question here. This is Jonah chapter 4, verse 1. If you know Jonah's story, God was using Jonah, and God said, "Jonah, I want you to go to this place and go tell these people that if they don't, that I'm going to destroy them." Okay.
Yeah.
And God sends, and there's a lot of story here, but Jonah tells them, and then God doesn't do it. And Jonah's like, "God, you made me look like an idiot."
Mm,
And this is where God says to Jonah, "Do you have do you have reason to be angry with me, or why do you have reason to be angry with me? You don't, right?"
yeah.
Like Jonah's saying, like, "Hey, man, you're hurting my credibility here, right? Like,
Right.
you told me to go tell these guys what you're going to do, and then you didn't
Yeah.
do it." And and this is an under the really the context of this question is that God's ways are higher than our ways.
Yeah.
And like God had a purpose in doing that. And that like in our own lives, we're going to think like, God, okay, okay, I got it. God, you wanted me to come here to do this. You wanted me to come here to, I see it now.
Mm,
Okay. Because Jonah wrestles with the willingness to even do this in the first place. Right. And we're going to wrestle with stuff like, okay, God, fine, I'll do it. And then we go do it. And God's like, well, that was for a lesson for you, but I'm not actually going to do that. I wanted you to go to learn the lesson. I'm not going to
yeah.
do what you think I'm going to do. I'm going to do what I know is the right plan. And if we're arguing with God, like, man, you didn't tell me, like you should have told me. Like, no, we don't have that position to say, God, you should have told me. The only right response is to trust the commander, right? And say, God, I'm going to follow you. And so this is an understanding. His ways are higher than my ways. And we have to ask the right questions back of God, right?
Hmm.
Because Romans, and I'll wrap this up here. Romans 9:20 says, Paul says, "Who are you to question God?" And this is where, like, it does matter the nature of the question, right? Because I have asked the question, God, why did you make me this way? But not questioning God in a secret, like, God, I know you. I'm asking that question with the heart of God. I know you made me this way for a reason. I just don't know what it is. And I'm not mad that you made me this way. I'm just trying to understand it. I'm not saying, God, why did you put this in my hand? I'm saying,
Right.
God, why is this in my hand? Show me what I'm supposed to do with this. And if you'll have that heart, that's Jeremiah, I believe it's 22. When you seek me and you seek me with all
Yeah.
your heart, you'll find me. When you seek to do God's will and God's plan for your life, He will reveal His purpose to you. It just matters just like God's questions have an intended purpose. Every question that He's asking is to reveal His character to us. Every question that He's asking is to show us who He is and get us pointed in the right direction. If you are going to ask God a question, make sure you're asking it out of the right heart.